All right, so we'll call to order our meeting of the Fairfield Library Board of Trustees at 7:07 PM on May 13th, 2024. First order of business is roll call. Chris Rogers, not present. Renee present. Eric Harrigan.
Present.
Bear. Peter Wilner, present. And Stephanie Borsari.
Present.
Wonderful. All right, we'll now open for public comments, which. You don't want to be with the rest of us?
On the public.
You're also here in somewhat of an official capacity. So.
I like the band though. I didn't come to speak, but thank you for having the packet out with the agenda. Because if we have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, it's really handy to know. So I know it's tremendously high traffic area, but.
Cool. Thank you. All right, so first item of business is the approval of minutes. So if everyone would take a few minutes to read over the minutes from our previous meeting in April. The amendments to the minutes from last meeting. Not anything that needs to be discussed. Raise the question. Then we have a motion to approve.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes from the April meeting, of the Library Board of Trustees.
Is there a second? Okay. All in favor? And there's no to oppose. So they are passed and approved. All right, next item of business is the chairman's report. Well, we have a new face in the room. Stephanie Borsari, welcome. Stephanie, you want to take just a couple, minute or so to just introduce yourself real quick to everyone?
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. As Erin and Andrew can both attest, I've been coveting a role with the trustees of the library since the position was posted publicly last year. Was it last spring where there was the open? I am a 20-year resident of Fairfield. My kids have both gone through public schools. We have used and continue to use the library for everything there is to offer. And I'm delighted to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just so everyone knows, Stephanie will be fulfilling the remainder of Jill Brown's term. So her term will be up a year from next month. Obviously, hopefully everything goes well, and we can, but yeah, just so everyone knows, for official purposes, she will be fulfilling Jill's term. Something we're very glad to have you. All right, so now I'll hand it over to Scott for our library updates.
So you'll find the operations report on page 6 of your packet. Spring has sprung at the Fairfield Public Library. We hosted and facilitated programs about gardening, the Gilded Age, and we did a commemoration of the Holocaust. Teens celebrated a pop icon, you can guess who that is, and families enjoyed outdoor story times. Press Reader, which is a database that we provide, continues to get fantastic usage. The statewide initiative, Passport to Connecticut Libraries, really took off this year. I think they had 900 participants, and a lot of them came to our locations. The new library cards with our fox mascot was a viral hit. We had a real fox who got his card, and it was very popular on social media. Several staff members attended the CLA conference. I think it was some of our highest participation in a few years now. And the Jen Butler Fashion Show, which was extremely popular, helped us test out our new PA system that we purchased for flexible programming. Some stats at a glance: patrons opened 70,000 articles in the last 12 months on Press Reader. That included publications from 53 countries. The Vita Tax Assistance Program helped 691 individuals complete their taxes. This year, the Passport to Connecticut Libraries program yielded over, I said 900, it was 700 participants. And our mascot branded library cards, we've issued about 400 in the month. So we launched them on the on Library Week, and they've been extremely popular. A lot of new cards, which really surprised us. And just one note, the April traffic study for on-street parking, which is what we're proposing on Old Post Road, did not happen in May, need to be rescheduled, so I won't go before the police commission until June.
So you said it didn't happen it will happen in May?
No, it didn't happen in May, so the road study didn't happen in May. The road study needed to happen before I went before them in June.
So you had something to talk about.
So now they're gonna do the study in June,
Gotcha.
in May, and I will go before the police commission on the 12th. And then I'm just gonna hand it over to Jan about some upcoming events and services.
So the big thing coming up is summer reading, and teens and children's go out to every school in the town and promote that, so they're gearing up for that.
And then just to kind of go to C and touch on the municipal budget. Section C.
Yep.
So everything passed. We went before the RTM. It was a relatively, I know it passed on the video, it was a relatively good meeting. However, I now will go to every budget meeting that there is after the finance board. So I sat and watched the RTM pass the budget, which was a thrilling and exciting night. But the Knicks and the Mets won, so it worked out pretty well. So it's good. We are gonna see, like a 5% increase in our book budget, and we're gonna see a 3% increase in our program budget, and we will have a teen librarian. So this will be the first time we're adding a full-time staff member to the staff in
15, I don't know, we've lost several positions in the last 11 years. This is the first.
Wow.
And that will take down.
No, we've got some other things going on, but in about a week, we're gonna reach out to HR. We start that process, because we'd like to get that person. We don't want the interview process happening while we're in summer reading.
Yeah.
So really, we need to get the process started now, although it's difficult, because Jen will start doing outreach to the schools like this week.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be interesting to see happen, but we're excited about it.
Scott, can you remind me, is that librarian going to be in this location?
So there'll be a Fairfield.
Okay.
So Jen will primarily be here.
Mhm.
And this new individual.
Got it.
Will be over at the branch, which is kind of takes care of two issues. One issue is that we don't have a ton of full-time staff at the branch, which will cause staffing issues. People call out, people tend to leave part-time jobs quicker or need to take prolonged vacation. We had someone recently who took like the entire summer off, because it's a part-time job. So this will actually help, because this individual doesn't just do team programming, but they will also do shifts on the adult desk. And that will be a huge help. And it will help with just the way the space is laid out. It will definitely help with team behavior, because when the down under is closed, the upstairs teen area is right across the shelves from the adult reference. So it'll be a really good support for that staff.
Great. That's great news.
When you mentioned that you didn't want the interviewing happening during the summer reading program, does that mean you're looking to fill it before?
We are going to try to start the problem beforehand, because if we wait until summer reading, then we're looking at August and getting candidates in the door in August. It's gonna be really difficult, and a lot of people will have already landed jobs.
Right. So you're looking to fill the position before the summer.
We're gonna
program.
try our best. Stephanie, just so you know, we do all of our hiring through the town HR, who in the last year has gotten incredibly better. But it's still really kind of ebbs and flows. We're probably also gonna run into a little bit of headwinds, because this is also when rec hires a ton of people. So, Anthony's gonna have HR's hands full. So we're really gonna try our best to get things done.
So they have to go through HR before you get to interview them?
Yes, so HR handles the posting of the position.
Yeah.
We vet the
You-
resumes, but they do kind of the initial process, because it goes through the town site. So, they're very involved in the process, which is
Mhm.
good to have. So sometimes the speed ebbs and flows, because I know they have a lot on their plate. So fingers crossed. Sometimes it goes really quickly, and sometimes it just kind of, other things happen.
But at least getting it posted now lets people who are looking know that if they are considering this,
Absolutely.
to put this in their, prospective next spots, so they don't.
And considering that we got 120 applicants for our last full-time open position, it's really, that was the hardest part. That's been the hardest part of hiring, is just the volume of resumes that we get in the door and going through all of that. But I think we've kind of got that down to a science. If I just jump the date.
Go for it.
Okay, so website update. Staff continue working on a new website, including reviewing feedback from our patron survey. The homepage is complete and approved. It looks very much like the one that we presented to you at our last meeting. So now the staff are working on a site map. There are some hiccups, and we are working through those issues, and we are gonna have a conversation with the friends soon. Some of it's really just working with the vendor, how to best carry over some of our blogs and stuff like that. But the tech assessment's complete, so once the site map's finalized, we'll be hitting the development.
Great. Do you have is there a latest timeline on launch?
No, I think we're about a month to 2 months behind at this point.
Yes.
So it's still looking like summer, but maybe towards the tail end of summer.
Yeah.
The good part is we've gotten really all the feedback that we need to get from our children's and teen staff, which was really our biggest concern when we were thinking of launching.
Is the redesign related to, I think I saw a new format of the newsletter?
No, that was more of something that we've just worked on for a
Okay.
while, and we've,
Much easier to.
it wasn't much. Yes, it looks fantastic. So that, I'm pretty sure that pretty much is the design we're gonna use moving forward. That was actually being worked on about a year ago. And then when we had a staff member leaving that department, that really kind of slowed things down, but we got that. So thanks for noticing. I will definitely tell Philip and Nancy that you know this. That's it.
Great. Awesome. And yeah, if there are any, if you don't mind, if you do have a timeline from the vendor development,
Sure.
that you can share with the board, just via email. Be great, so we can see some timing stuff, and then, Jennifer's excited about it. We have a much improved experience on the website. It's very excited for that. Now, if we can get what is it, CRC?
We're not gonna talk about ILS. We just saw Jan's face. We're not gonna talk about ILS.
whole other.
And Stephanie, so you know, ILS is the integrated library system. So that's the computer system that we use for our membership database, all of our books, like how we add them to the system. And when you look for a book, that's actually the front end of a back end. It comes up a lot in meetings and we use ILS or see everything. Look,
It's needling staff a little bit.
I'm also not a fan of our ILS. Watched any meeting.
All right, so we'll now move into, are there any questions with regards to any of the library updates? Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jan. So we'll now move into the committee / liaison reports. First one, we have fundraising committee. Peter is not in attendance tonight, but I would like to tell Stephanie, this is something that I would like you to, as part of coming on board, to help support Peter. He's had some health challenges of late, so it's something that I think would be great to have another person working on some of the fundraising stuff. Much of this, as we'll get into it, will be working closely with the Friends, Donna, who are here in attendance from the Friends, because they are the 501c3 arm of everything. But it is something that as we have people who have experience in this, resourcing and thoughts, then obviously maybe will contribute as well. But yeah, just something that we can have. Does feel like it has stalled a little bit from when we originally planned this, what, year or so ago? Met.
Yeah.
So
It's a relatively new committee then?
yes,
Okay.
our committees are a somewhat new development for the board since I came to chair. So that was, oh God, almost 2 years ago. Whew, time. All right. So just want to give you a heads up on that. We can talk separately about that. Approach that and as well get involved. The ad hoc building committee, we don't have any updates on this one. One of the things, we will be meeting at Woods next month. Still, Scott, let's talk. One of the things we need to think about is our next step on this in terms of, I think we have an idea of what we need to do, of how do we, understanding what the next step is in terms of outlay from the board, which would be for most likely architects to identify plans for overhaul before we take it to the public. Because there will be a lot, especially, and as we have a new team librarian coming on, we'll want to have some input from the team there, Nancy, the new team librarian, to make sure that the space is being utilized the most proper way, but also that we have plans for the interim on that. So it's just.
Are we going in this with, like, the objective is to improve woods that broad? Or do we have something specific that then we're going to look at a low, mid, high spend? And then under each of these, there are particular things that will get improved and will not, like, it's like when you renovate your house.
Yes.
I want the really fancy tub, I have to have the cheap tile,
Yeah.
what are we trying to accomplish?
So I think we need, right now, we was through via walkthroughs and discussions with Nancy and Scott. It's pretty clear that cosmetic changes to woods would be spend that is, I don't want to say temporary, but not as impactful as potentially a gut. There's obviously a lot of.
So it's largely a reconfigure. We want to reconfigure the space and make it in line with the modern use of libraries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
we have a
so
range.
we need to get an understanding of where that is, like what's the point there? Because I don't think tear down is the way to go.
Right.
But assessing what internally we can do, and if there are things that we can do internally without doing a full closure, full gut, we can address that. I think that's where we need to know scope
Right.
of everything. So that when I say next steps, because we're none of us are architects.
Right.
But in terms of how the space is currently set up, we can do cosmetically, will not have the change that we need to have at Woods for the next, let's say, 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, what's the, like, that objective is really gonna be, I think, important to nail down, because
Yeah.
that, the design brief, basically, right?
Yep. So I think that probably, yeah, that's a better way to put it, is the aim of that video to nail down that brief. I think the challenge obviously right now is knowing costs, not
Yeah.
having even a handle on what a gut job looks like from a cost perspective. So, yeah, no, that makes sense. So Chris is on the committee, but obviously he's got a very full plate late. So Aaron, I'll be in touch. We can talk a little bit about that. Scott as well. So we can figure out, start thinking about design brief, things like that, so we can then talk to take it to the next step, because
And I assume the town provide resources for them. Go to the town hall.
Yes, and we would have to get on the capital schedule.
yes.
Sorry, when I meant the resource, that a town provided architect.
So you might wanna go outside.
No, they would,
Might
they
be
wanted
honest and go get it.
previous administration
Yeah.
wanted us to go outside. What it was presented to me was,
Okay.
you all need to come up with a plan and then come to us to let us know
Got
what it looks.
So that's part of we'll be paying for the architecture. That so what we use our funds for, is similar to what we've done with the website.
No, I get that. I didn't know if there was a preferred vendor, like they.
Yeah.
At least.
And I think it would be wise for us to use, there's 3 or 4 firms in the general New England area that do libraries.
Yeah.
And that would be my
Yeah.
preference, to use, we've spoken with a couple firms over the last year. It's probably half the reason I've gone to conferences now is just to kind of nail down architects, have a conversation. So I think there's some really great architects out there, like the school district uses specific.
Mhm.
Because they want to use people they want to use firms that are used to designing schools. So.
A lot of people are gonna think about.
Work flow of people, flow of information. Yeah.
There's a new library that is sinking
You can't.
because they didn't think. because
They
didn't
didn't
think
factor
about
the way the books.
the books.
Wow, then they're not gonna get many jobs.
And I've been on committees,
Yeah.
I've been on some committees where the vision of the architect was very different than
Yeah,
probably what the future of the field was going to be.
right.
So you just have to. be-
That's where I think like that brief, like what are we solving? Like,
Yeah.
The more specific, and then give that low, medium, high, like,
So, and I think we talked a little bit about this after our last, when we met, was, one of the things that we think about, when we think about this space is physical media is always going to have a place in the library,
Mhm.
but that presence, everything we see is going to probably be shrinking over the next, let's say, 20 years. Well, knowing how often we are able to renovate these 60 years. So how do we make it so that the space, similar to what we've done down with where we have the DVDs, have moved it in, transitioned it into study rooms? How do we future-proof for things of that nature? The changing environment of the library, so that we are set up for today, but also easily adjustable for the future.
yeah. And I think we have to keep demographics in mind, right? Because today, I think if we look at Woods, we have lots of teens, and we also have a fairly large elderly population, right?
Yep.
Because we have all those condos around there.
Yes.
And that may or may not change, but I think making sure we keep an eye out to those changing demographics in that particular area, because it is a very popular neighborhood.
It
really
is.
is a hub over there.
Yeah,
I think having that as in mind will be important to track as well.
definitely. And then we can figure out. Doing construction. All right. So, we can also talk because we will be in the woods next month, have a more in-depth discussion of potentially have Scott, let's say, talk like for design brief, start to talk through, just put words on paper, because we're gonna be sitting there. And make sure it's something that's not online, because we have, once 7:45 hits, we have no connection down in that basement. Which would be something we want to put in the design brief.
Yeah.
But yeah, that might be a good, small working type session.
And we still need to plan May's tour. I figured May and Stephanie can do the tours at the same time.
That's
Although
right.
you know the buildings as patrons, you get to see, Aaron was very excited to get to see all the behind the scenes
Right.
stuff, all the stuff. So, that'll be helpful to kind of do
Yeah,
exciting all of this.
and see how it flows, somewhat not. Yeah, so maybe we can do that hour before. So we have a meeting at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock.
So do the committee meeting? For the meeting?
Yeah, I was gonna say just walk through.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's actually a great idea.
if that works for you guys. We'll shoot for that. Great. All right, with that, we'll pass over to Donna for an update from the Friends.
Right, well, as we know, Friends have been very, very busy. April, we had our big book sale, which was really successfully attended. We had Jen Butler's fashion show, which I think was the most attendees we've ever had. And I think we had contributions of like $2,800 for that,
Great.
which all go, Jen, with the proceeds of this, she does donate it to the Friends, and then usually funds a specific project, something that you, often in the teen space, so something that's done, so it'll go to something, a particular thing that we will, talk about at the board. We also did our Water for Elephants fundraiser. So last Wednesday we went in, we had a little bit of a tight timeline, so we didn't sell quite as many tickets as we wanted to, but the people who went had a great time. I wasn't able to do the book talk, because I was out of town, but I did come and watch the movie on May 1st, and I went into the city. Jan was able to come with us to the city. Did you and your husband like it?
Very much.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good show. We had great seats. So we're looking forward to doing more of these as we go forward. We've got a couple, chit-chatting with some people in the audience who do work for nonprofits, have a couple of other avenues to go down to look at purchasing tickets, so that instead of maybe having to buy them all in advance, we can hold them and then only, once we sell them, only have to pay for that certain amount.
Oh,
So
nice.
we've got some interesting other ways to look at that. So that was really popular. The last Sound Waves concert also happened, and the last big thing that we have coming up is the literary luncheon. So the literary luncheon is on May 31st at the Patterson Club. We have Stephen Rowley, who wrote The Gunk. His new book is The Guncle Goes Abroad. So he's the first male author we've ever had. So he'll be there, and we're looking forward to having anyone who can join us come have lunch. It's usually really fun. That's it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Right. Donna, so we'll move into the reconciliations and check registry,
The library will be closing in 25 minutes. If you need a library card or special assistance, please come to the secretary desk.
please take a look.
Reminder, the Wi-Fi will shut down expected at 7:45.
What's it?
Treasurer's report first?
Oh my God, I missed it.
It's okay.
Oh,
It'll be fun.
yeah, no, sorry, I totally spaced on.
That's all right. Okay, so the endowments are, the balance as of the end of April is 9.3 million, which is up about 4% since the end of the year. Our funds follow the S&P generally, so April was a down month, so based on market performance, our balance dropped about 230,000 since the end of March. As I was talking with Andrew a bit earlier, I did reach out to our advisor, who's now with Mercer. I haven't talked to him about our portfolio since they switched over. So I figure I'd schedule for the week before our next meeting to have an update. That he'll review the portfolio, let us know if we should make any changes, and I'll have to for all of you then. That's really all I have on the treasury.
Did those other requests that we talked about last time go through? Wasn't there another?
The Barbara Frankel annuity beneficiary check has finally arrived. It was $2,901.55. And we also received 4 donations in memory of patron who passed away, Virginia Cerrone, totaling $375. And we have then left something in 2 other wills, which are currently in probate.
Great. Now we can move on to the reconciliations and check registry. So, everyone just take a moment to review, the reconciliation report as well as the checks for approval. And ask any questions as necessary.
I'll just say that the deposits, there's no information there, but the 337876 was from the Friends for program support. And the 3101 included the Barbara Frankel check for 2,900.
Okay.
And other small donations.
Give me a sense as to what some of these generally are. I am not looking for line items.
So go through, like, the checks, so all the checks on here that we approved them on the last meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the checks for approval, this is stuff that we'll be cutting in the coming month.
Okay.
So if you go down through it, the pantry is for adult challenge practices, and you see SRP, that's summary program, so stock. Is the majority gonna be through this month of checks?
So it'll be, what you'll see on the account is, right, is the checks that were passed that were approved last month. They're primarily programming. And all of the programming is actually reimbursed by the.
Yeah,
So-
you can see on the account, far right.
Yep.
Friends gifts, so it's Don was saying, much of that is going to team programming, Friends music, the museum passes. Then if you go to general minutes, Lori, Sterling Grant Works, which is our doing the website. The CLA conference.
There is a percentage of the trustee, so this is just the trustee budget, it's not the town. And also it's just money that passes the trustee fund, and there's a small percentage of that budget which will go towards collection development, purchasing of books. Only because we've received money in the past that was earmarked for that purchasing. I mean, you'll actually see a little bit of an increase in that probably in next year's budget. And then there's a little bit of money that's been put aside by the trustees to pay for training for librarians and travel for librarians. The town provides a budget of that, but it's not as robust as we'd like it to be. So the trustees a few years ago decided that they would put some of their budget towards that.
Yeah.
Other things you would see from this is if we were doing a large furniture, the trustees tend to furnish some capital.
We better not be
expenditures.
doing more furniture purchasing, Scott.
So capital purchases, I joke that it's never doors or toilets, it's always chairs and tables. So you'll see large amounts come out of this when you all do those projects. Probably the largest project now, which is like a capital project, is the website. But other than that, it's really just a pass-through account.
Thank you for that explanation.
Any other questions regarding either the reconciliation or the checks for approval? Then do we have a motion to,
I will make a motion to approve the check register and reconciliations.
second? All in favor? All right. So the reconciliations and check registry are approved. Now we will move on to policy for review discussion. So it is in the packet of the internet policy. Scott, would you like to say a few words with regards to what we should be thinking about with this? We won't be having any changes or material discussion on the policy today. This will be for review, so that next time we meet, we can fully review and establish any changes.
So this policy covers using our equipment to access the internet while in the building. It was actually recently discovered. We haven't had this on our website. Every library I've ever become the director of, there is always like 4 years of finding a random policy that everybody forgot. So this was the random one I've discovered recently. We will be providing an update after we run it. Attorney, who's very quick at responding to things. We will have it up the next meeting. I will promise you there will be updates to this policy. It's a little antiquated. And it will include patrons who bring their own devices to connect to the Wi-Fi.
Just to be clear, it wasn't posted on the website, but it was in place.
Yes, and it's posted when you sign into our computers. That's where I went, is this a real policy? And someone said, yes, let me find it for you.
Yes,
In a few folders, so,
definitely something we wanted to
yes.
update it. Four. All right. Yeah, so in the interim, be thinking about that. Feedback from Scott. Philip. And speaking of Philip, we have our unattended adults policy that wanted to get a little bit more information as to the details as to why we need to make adjustments to this policy from a legal perspective and what we can put in to have policy that meets our needs, but also is, legal.
So, we reviewed the two, so I'm Phil Pierce, the town attorney.
Oh, sorry. She said that.
And you can just call me Phil. So, we reviewed the two policies, the unintended adults policy and the children's and teen spaces policy. So the issue is that the restriction is based solely on age, and so that technically would violate the state's reasonable accommodation laws. Recent case that came out was the Edge case, where there was a section of the gym that was restricted to women only. Even though there's good intentions behind that, the women's only section of the gym is discriminatory and is illegal. So this is similar to that, except it's age-based. So the suggestion is, and this board decides how to implement the policy. So I'm not telling you can't have the current policy that you do, but I have to tell you that the risk is that somebody brings
Yes.
a lawsuit or a CHRO complaint, and there's fines. You're not the only library that has this sort of policy or these sorts of policies. But it should regulate, ideally, it would regulate more the conduct than say people of a certain age are not allowed to use this section of the library. So I'm happy to take additional questions.
Yeah, I think it.
Did the using grades instead of ages avoid that issue or no?
I mean, it doesn't really because
Just a proxy.
yeah, it's a proxy and it's a pretty close approximation. And you might,
Yeah.
there might be a little bit more variability there, but not.
And you can, using my language wisely, you can create restrictions on age for minors. The issue is creating a restriction on ages for those over the age of 18. I will tell you that Trumbull, Darien, New Haven, Wallingford, Meriden, Norwalk, Southington, Avon, New London, Bridgeport, all the Bridgeport libraries, Newtown, Greenwich, the Teen Commons area in New Haven, all do have age restrictions for individuals who are over 18. So there are libraries who are restricting adults from their spaces, and it will be something that I'm gonna actually bring up to the legislative committee tomorrow and say this may be something for us to focus on in the coming, because it just ended, in the coming year. It was a surprise to me because coming from New York, you are allowed to do this for certain schools and libraries.
Right, and the law here is just different, and, yeah, I think it really, long-term requires a legislative solution. You don't have to be the first library to kind of be the one to change, but there's that risk. It's not been tested yet, there's not a case or.
Yeah.
And so from a legal perspective, then what language would you recommend we use that would allow us to discourage adults from hanging out in the children's room for potentially kind of specious reasons?
So our suggestion is to use the code of conduct policy. And we made a revision to the children and teen spaces policy to make them designed or intended for use by those patrons,
Okay.
and not say that that section is, of libraries is not allowed to be used by.
You're saying here's who it's for, but you're not explicitly saying that means you can't go in it?
And then you have to enforce the code of conduct, because then it's based on the conduct of the patron.
Mhm.
You're not saying you can't go in there and use the materials, you're saying that. I mean, the middle ground policy that we created, I think says that if you go to use materials, you're encouraged to take them to a different section
Yeah.
of the library to review them, which
Yeah.
seems reasonable, you're still giving them access to the materials.
So we have 3 different versions of children in
Yeah.
teen spaces.
Yeah.
Which one is the one that is?
They should all be redlined.
Yeah.
So,
So 2 of them are red line, 1 is draft.
So ignore the one that's draft. Look at the 2 which are redlined.
Okay.
That was just putting the packet together. That was putting a packet together mistake.
okay, there are actually 3.
Right?
So, yeah, we did kind of
This unattended adults one?
Yes, oh, that's why. The unattended adults in the children's department is,
There's 4 total pages.
okay, and the unattended, so on page 15 is the policy that is currently in place.
The unintended adult.
So that we're getting, that's.
This is the one
That's gonna be
that.
changed. The
that
one on,
you did.
yes, that's the one that needs to be rescinded. This, page 16 has one that has the age restrictions.
Yeah. Birth to
The
grade.
attention, please, the library will be closing its
Yes.
Please check out the material now.
And then the next one has the same thing, but it says, designed for library uses from birth to grade 5. And the
Yes.
second point being unaccompanied adults or teens must take the item to an age appropriate section of the library to read. So you can come and get your book, which I can look at it someplace else.
Yeah, so the first one is, I think,
Middle ground.
So meant for any age.
So the one that takes out the bullet points seems to be the middle ground. It has the bullet points red line.
It says basically they're encouraged.
yes, the one that takes out the bullet points is the middle ground.
The draft. Disregard draft. There are 2 red lines.
16 and
The one would be a very short policy. It would basically be paragraph.
Right.
Yeah, that's still relatively the same.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, residential, this one that has the bullet still included does have the, well, grade, not age necessarily, right? But as we say, it's, it is a bill,
I mean, this would be probably least likely to be.
the one that still has the,
Yeah, with the location on.
One on page 18.
Yeah.
Because of the potential lawsuit.
discrimination.
It's the most likely to be found discriminatory. Versions.
That's a question.
Yeah.
What would be, so the one with no bullet point, what would be? So basically then an adult could be in the children's spaces as long as they're following the rest of the code. What would get kicked out?
Just loiter in the space.
I mean,
Be doing
I think
something.
defining loitering is something that libraries have really wrestled with over the years. And I think you would have to make a clear case of what loitering is. Because I think, for me, I have a higher tolerance for what some might consider loitering.
Well, you're allowed to just come and sit in the library.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Do adults go hang out in our children's room?
So the two concerns are, one, in terms of the children's space, it's, and we've asked the staff.
Hmm.
One concern which Tamara puts across very, very well is patrons, patrons may actually take issue with how loud the children and the parents are. And then it becomes a really uncomfortable conversation when you have someone who's come to the children's room, sits down, expects a quiet library in our children's room. I know, you just made the face I am having. But that has happened for individuals who are there, who want a more traditional library experience. They want to.
Why would you go to the children's room?
Because they want to relive the children's room of their childhood where they were shushed by librarians. So that's one issue. Another issue is just, we had an individual who I had to go and speak to because they were actually part of the town. And it was just, they were just hanging out. It was an uncomfortable experience. But
Right.
they were exhibiting, I don't think they knew, but they were exhibiting behavior that was making other people feel uncomfortable. So that's really it. And then having our staff kind of judge what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. We also have reported multiple times that we have a lot of individuals in this town. I just had, two of them in my class today on the Bird software. We talk about how wonderful Fairfield is to age in place. And that's great, but we also talk about in multiple meetings how we have seen people who are having issues with cognitive development as they get older, which is one issue that we had to deal with on the weekend where the woman may have not been completely aware of how uncomfortable she was making the situation be because she was really kind of reliving the child. So it just puts you in those really uncomfortable situations where on a Saturday, on a weekday where we have amazing, full-time staff who are done a ton of training, it works really, really well. On a Saturday where we maybe have not been able to schedule both full-timers and we have part-timers that this is like 38 hours a week job, and they don't have the time to do all the training that we have, that makes for uncomfortable conversations. So, that's really, how do we draw the line? Jen, who is our teen librarian, makes a really great point. One issue that we've had in the teen room here in particular is adults who want to use it just because it's a great space. And the teens are not comfortable with having some adult in that space. We have it at Woods because that's a flex space. So the teen area is an adult area during the day. Those adults tend to go, oh, the teens are all here now. Whereas here, it can become, again, a little more uncomfortable depending on where that person is in their life. The other issue with the teen room is you have adults with children who would prefer to use that space because it's a cooler space to be in and it's on the first floor. And we've been having some difficulty with that. Now we can start by saying, sorry, your 6-year-old is not allowed in the room because they're eating a puzzle piece or a connect, but that has led to some uncomfortable
Yeah.
conversations as well.
I think, I just pulled up the code of conduct and, it does give us, putting that in the children and teen spaces, does give us a little bit more leeway in terms of, and the same uncomfortable conversations we have the age gated policy in place, or we have, because it's bordering potentially disruptive behavior, which we don't specify exactly what disruptive behavior, we just said it can include shouting, fighting. Disruptive behavior could be, say, if you're eating a puzzle piece. It does give us a lot in terms of, I would say, in terms of giving our librarians.
It's like, it's vague enough though that it can, if you're, I would imagine if I were staff, be hesitant to enforce it because it's very subjective,
Yeah,
what's, and you could then find yourself in a situation where you're doing the right thing, right? My interpretation is a little different than yours may, and then some person comes in and it's okay when May's on, but it's not okay when I'm here. And so that, I know that's what the purpose of policy is to take the gray out and make it so that it's clear.
And it's going to actually put some pressure on Jane and Nancy and I because, we interpret the policy and we help the staff.
Yeah.
We give the language to use when enforcing this. And that's going to be really hard because that may still lead us to a lawsuit, but now it's not, we're not being sued for the policy. We're being paid for the enforcement, and the enforcement, the interpretation of the policy and the enforcement by the staff will put more pressure on the staff that, wow, I could get sued for my interpretation of the policy. And the safe way to go is just let the individual in the room, even though he's kind of creeping, he or they are creeping someone out. I can see where the staff are gonna say,
Yeah, I don't want to.
yeah, I don't want to.
And that was my question, in the example you gave, like, say someone is just sitting there not doing anything, making people uncomfortable, then there's no, and staff really wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, it's the definition of uncomfortable is not really defined.
Right.
So, and this does impact other users, the use of the library. We've seen that with the teen room. We're just getting our numbers in the teen room after our misbehaving teens. And I will tell you that it will affect, all it's going to take is a Facebook group saying I had a really creepy experience in the children's room. And that will.
Another question, which you all maybe have talked about previously, and if you have, sort of pushing understanding where you landed. You've talked about cognition and those who are older, cognitively not recognizing that they're older. What about cognitively impaired people who are outside of the age range, but behaviorally, cognitively fit within?
They belong.
So our last
Okay,
our policy, which used age ranges for how it was for minors, basically. For everybody under 18,
okay.
we can restrict their age. And that's actually built into the policy because we do a lot of programming around that. So we actually built that in where staff can make a decision, usually through speaking with a teacher or an aide or a tutor, on whether or not, it mostly comes around the teen room. And we do this a lot in the teen room where we have like the Best Buddies program comes from Ludlow. It's really a decision there. Yes, at 18 is the age that we tend, we're senior years when we tend to cut people off, but there are individuals in programs or who have aides that after speaking with staff are allowed to.
And even from the friends perspective, like we have volunteers at staff, the ambassador desk, and you'll have people come in that are, on the spectrum or whatever else, and sometimes need assistance, and you do your best to direct people, and at the end of the day, we send them over to fill up, we send them over to the information desk and say like, something's not right, and we've even previously had volunteers who were on the spectrum that help sort books. Like we want to be open and let people in here, and we assume that when they're coming and they're able to conduct themselves in a manner that they're comfortable themselves. So like somebody dropping a bunch of books isn't going to freak them out or, something like that. So from a volunteer perspective, we try to manage that. We have tried to manage that. It's difficult when it's just just a patron coming in, who may not be familiar or understand, or who could potentially just get spooked by something. And I know we've had issues with, the staff that intervene with, something gets confused.
It's freestanding.
That was a policy that accommodated all of that previously.
Yeah, so that was so this is just dealing with adults.
Yeah.
But as adults are defined as kind of in the previous.
Thank you.
So I mean, this will put a lot on the staff and it will,
Has any library ever, and nobody's ever had any legal action on any of this, do you know? I know we don't want to be the test case, but
Not the- Well, I mean, could be.
Could be any.
library, because I don't think, I think most libraries, as Scott said, they have similar existing policies.
yeah.
But we didn't find any case where it's been libraries.
the American Library Association in their teen space guidelines says that there should be age restriction on space.
Right. But that's not applicable to
It's not Connecticut.
Connecticut body of law. Connecticut law is
Yes.
right now inconsistent with
Yes.
the guidelines from the association, which
So
are.
we're looking to go above the letter of the Connecticut law to follow the guidelines recommended by the association. How does the staff feel about
and
that?
the staff really, again, the head of children's services, I don't want to read, she wrote me a whole paragraph. But, they really don't want to see this policy change.
From what we have,
From, yes, they've looked at both versions. So the policy that we currently have in place, the policy that we're suggesting, they don't want to see those age restrictions. Some of the words they've used is overall safety, well-being of children visiting the space. Again, the adults experience themselves. That adults probably prefer more noise-controlled area. And also staff should also not be tasked to simply look at someone or their behavior and say child abuser or harmless. It's Tamara's language. That creates a negative and stressful environment in an already very busy children's room where we're constantly needing to adjust behavior of children who love to climb. Last time I was in there in the lamp.
You could get at this through capacity. Like when there's the programs running, we can only have, children and their caregivers there. Is there, would that
I
be?
think that would still violate the law. It was just,
Sort of restricting programming to, when you're gonna look at the same.
An adult coming to a children's programming, that would be.
Under the current law, you run into the same issue.
Okay. Okay.
And also, you're gonna have times when there's no programming, it's just
Right.
library use, so. Doesn't solve that concern.
No.
Staff.
Law is specific for schools and libraries.
It's for public accommodations.
For anything, right?
But like, I can't sign up for my baby's swim lesson. For myself, like,
yes, you can.
I technically could, like, they didn't tell me that I can't.
So I can't keep you out of it.
Well, I mean,
I'm just shocked.
there are gonna be policies also out there that have not been tested.
Right.
Because, somebody has not wanted to sign up for baby swim, maybe. Not taking that to the CHR because they talked about that strongly. There were, this edge case is a really good example. When all over the naked Supreme Court, there were some people that felt very strongly about this, that there shouldn't be a woman's only section of the gender. That was stricken as being illegal under public accommodation law.
So they've challenged it based on gender, but there's been no challenge based on age.
Well, I don't know that there's been no challenge based on age ever. There's been nothing applicable to life.
So there have been challenges based on age? In the current law?
Just specifically.
Scott, can you just clarify to me? I'm sorry that
That's what I'm here
I'm asking
for.
all of these questions.
We love it. I'm a
Oh, no, I
librarian.
got the new person asked about.
You've got two librarians here. We'll answer all that.
I guess I'm just confused as to which policy the library staff is most comfortable with.
We would want to go with the not middle ground policy.
you want to keep the,
The one that's not red current.
Well, we would want to keep a version of the current policy, but it updated.
right.
So you'd rather have us not rescind the current policy?
We would like you at some point to rescind the current policy because it needs to be updated,
But not with any of the options that are laid.
not with the two options that are current.
Okay, what adaptations would the staff prefer to see?
Something that covers both the teen room and the children's room. Because currently the policy as it stands only covers the children's room. It does not cover the teen,
Thank you.
which is a big concern.
And that is why we have this draft version.
Yes.
And that is proposed by the library staff.
That's proposed by the library administration with the assistance.
And yet it doesn't meet the legal, according to Bill and it's Connecticut code, is that? what I'm understanding?
It would,
There's a risk that it would be found to be discriminatory signage.
Is that a risk the town's willing to take? Would they be willing to authorize this policy?
Well, the town, I mean, this board.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It's, I don't determine the
Right,
policy. I just-
right. You're just
Yeah.
telling us where we stand.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it seems more, Scott, to your point, more risky to put this subjectively in the hands of whomever is on staff, whether it's a full-time staff, part-time staff, to determine if what someone's doing is appropriate or inappropriate. And that to me almost seems more risky.
And we'll post these where? How will adults coming to the library know?
so we don't, I mean, this is the philosophy of your current director.
Yeah.
We are the signs. So in other words, I always, and that's why I've been rewriting policy. Policy for me is more for the staff to know and understand and enforce.
Mhm.
And then when the person goes, is there a policy? Because you go occasionally.
Yeah.
Then you say, okay,
Yes,
here's,
I know.
let me print it out for you, let me hand you the policy for you to read. 9 times out of 10, it is, okay, thank you. Often when I get called to be the library bouncer. And I always come down with the policy in my hands, explain what's going on and say, here's a copy of the policy. Most of the time, individuals don't take it. When they do take it, we don't. I have been at libraries, however, that they've taken the policy and they've run with it. They've showed up at board meetings, they've argued the policy, and they have got legal. They've hired a lawyer to fight the policy. Particularly a gentleman who did not want to wear shoes. So, which we made an accommodation for based on religious grounds. But that is always possible, but it's not the likely outcome. But we like to write policy, clear policy, so it supports what the staff need to do to create a welcoming and orderly space.
Yeah, we need to make it so it can be consistent, so everybody has the same viewpoint of it and uses those same judgment criteria and words, right, if they need to speak to something.
Andrew, do we need to decide this tonight? Because I think this is all new information to all of us. Obviously, but this is all new information.
Yeah, so we have, I mean, speaking from the, position of risk, if we continue to have this in place, we are protected. But do we have to today? No. We have it on here because now, Scott, to the unattended adults and children's department policy piece of all this. We were more speaking towards
If
the.
you don't vote on anything tonight, the original policy stays in.
Mhm.
So that means, and that's one of the reasons why it's on the agenda to rescind. Because the concerns that have been, and I share some of the concerns. It's not how I want to spend months of my job is being sued or something.
Yeah.
So that's why it's on the agenda, but this is up to the board. The board can not make a motion on any of these.
How uncomfortable does that make you feel?
I'm fine with it.
How many times are we redirecting people from places they don't belong? Like in a quarter, in 3 months?
I would say probably when it comes to the teen and children's room, really about once to twice a month. a lot of the times it's 13-year-olds who are running around the children's room because it's fun. Or younger kids who are in the teen room because their friends are in there playing on the computers and they're in that weird age. But I would say, since I have been here, I've needed to speak to about 3 adults who were in the children's room that the staff weren't comfortable with. And I know of one other situation where the
So
individual.
over the course of a couple of years.
It's once a quarter.
So,
But we're allowed to make a policy around minors.
Yes.
That one, there's no issue with. You're under 18, we can say you can't go on certain things. That's no issue at all. So it's only the unattended adults in the children's section.
Just like I can register for baby swim.
And because there are accommodations made in conversation with those who cognitively.
is there one of these you would want to pass tonight? Is there a version here? that you
I think
would want-
both are very well written. Bill's done a really good job on them, but I think I never want to press the board to pass a policy right away. They're not comfortable with, and they would sit and think about it and ask additional questions.
Yeah, I think my perspective on this is, I think one of the interesting things with the precedent you mentioned, Joe, is that it's gender-based. That we haven't seen a challenge to this law with regards to age in a matter, in a manner that is reflective of what we are discussing. RG, right?
Certainly not until the libraries. I don't know whether there's something, how close they're being.
Yeah.
Just going to it.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know, from a legal perspective, if you have any insight on that, or how one's been fined even something about, where age was the issue of accommodation. That we could at least have a barrier, I'm sorry, reference point of what the accommodation challenge is. Because I think we all, feel that a certain way. You mentioned in your email there's an aspect of wanting to protect children in these spaces and make teens feel comfortable in the spaces. That accommodation can be an interesting, be a bit wishy-washy in terms of the legal language. What does accommodation look like from an age perspective? Gender, it's a bit clearer potentially from that aspect. Yeah, I know you said best intentions, obviously, do that with the edge fitness case. So I think having some type of reference as to what the injury is of not being accommodated from the age perspective. Why somebody would want in the children's space that is designed for teens. So I would say, based on everything that's, based on everything that I'm hearing, and I'm not the arbiter of this, the board is the arbiter of this, but it seems like there still needs to be a little bit more discussion and research on in terms of age accommodation and what that means from a legal perspective, from how we want to move forward, knowing that we have many of our the majority of our neighboring have policies like this already in place. So ask the question, do we have a motion to approve or rescind their policy? So, what I would say is for next steps. Scott, I know you've gotten feedback from the staff in terms of, so right now, just so everyone's clear. We don't have children in teen spaces. It's the unattended, unattended. Say it correctly. Unattended adults. Yes. And so that will remain in place for the time being. Till we can reach an agreement as to what we want to have put in place. So we have we have the draft. Got that you put together, the library staff put together. This is the red line of the draft that Bill read, correct? And then we have I guess we keep calling it middle ground, but the
One with bullet points. There's no bullet points in a draft.
and so, Um. So. So from a next step perspective. Yeah, Phil, as I say, I think the one thing that we are missing a little bit in all this is we all get the idea, the accommodation piece, what that means, but from the perspective of what it looks like for each teen, I think is, to be honest, teens the one I'm more concerned about than children's. Because I could see 20, few students there that are probably not supposed to be there. If there's any direction as to what has been out there, or in terms of case law.
We can look to see cases where the laws don't apply.
I was actually just looking at the law where it's the person is accommodation based on race, creed, color, national, like it's a laundry list
Protected classes.
of thing, exactly, marital status is on there. Well, that has to be lawful source of income. So there's any number of things, and yes, ages is one of them. But having an idea. Where cutting the nose off the face sometimes with this stuff. So having a better measure of what sort of what that would look like, even if it's, as I said, not necessarily in the library. Any space where they're saying that accommodation wasn't made because of age.
Do they limit anything at the senior center? Can anyone go to the senior center? Is there any language there that would be applicable?
They probably have policies that do that. They've not asked me to review it.
Yeah, okay. I think what else would we have that's like,
The rec is a really good example. I mean, does this now mean I can join 14U soccer or 14U basketball? I can compete in 14U basketball. I can beat my 14-year-old, so I'd be excited to do.
Right.
And school, you said school as well?
Yeah,
well, classrooms, though, they probably have like, I just don't think I could rejoin first grade.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be.
Yeah.
I think there's somewhere in there they'd be able to kick me out.
Well, there's protections for schools in Connecticut, but not mine.
But New
Yes,
Jersey,
yeah,
has,
yeah.
Yeah. It's not quite public, so.
Where in New York, there's protections, I believe it's for libraries and recreation.
Scott, you said you were talking legislatively.
This won't be, it just ended. So this would not be something even, and we would have to get somebody, I would have to get the library community, which could be difficult to get behind this and get a legislator to be interested in running.
I mean, most people seem to have a policy anyways, and whatever the guidance is.
I think this will be, we're probably gonna bring it up at the next flag meeting, and this will probably be a surprise to some. We're gonna be
It's
the
an interesting,
bearers of bad news.
and
again.
that's too from the library community. Obviously, the ALA has their perspective, as we discussed. Connecticut case law looks at it a different way, as I mentioned, that it's for, that there's a number of different classes that cover this. So is it taking a, it feels a little overkill sometimes, in a way. But that all being said, making a change at this point doesn't feel like we're in a position to make a change. And yeah, if there is,
I
I'm
mean,
beating a dead horse but if there is anything that you can point to, that would be helpful. Just to give us some direction on this, because it is the other thing that's come up in discussion that to me is somewhat concerning. And I'll ask you this, in a situation where somebody is, let's say it's 40-year-old, I don't know, whatever, unaccompanied 40-year-old in the children's space. We have the policy as it is, we have the code of conduct, and the librarians and whoever is working in the children's library asks them to leave. They feel that they've not been given an accommodation for age. We have our policy, we point to code of conduct, they disagree with that. They say, I was discriminated based on my age. Does the change in this cover for that?
The change in what we're dealing with.
So let's say we get the bill. Yeah.
Because, then they're violating the code of conduct. So it's their access to the space is not being restricted based on age, it's being restricted based on.
And so
You can always restrict based on,
You always do behavior, right?
yeah, you can always do conduct.
yeah,
People don't have the right to, it's not protected to just like.
be there. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
That's where you're putting all.
But you're putting-
Right, then it transfers a large onus to the staff.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it more subjective and
Yeah.
transfer the burden to the staff.
Yeah.
to,
Say that.
that's the
a little-
I mean, again, you're talking about someone who's gonna get angry enough to go spend his money or her money to go to a lawyer to make a big deal about this, like,
Yeah.
That's not everybody. I mean, there are people who do that.
Yeah, that's something you always,
There are always people who will pick,
they may have a very strong lawful source of income,
yeah.
and
They wanna waste a little bit of.
yeah, it's putting the onus on the library staff, be stressful for everyone, so.
Just, maybe just give a little bit of background, how many times it's happened, what are the most egregious things, and share that with the board members, right? Because ultimately, like, what kinds of things are happening, give a little description of, what was going wrong, right? And probably from a legal perspective, for you to understand too, like, well, what are we talking about? Like, what is the behavior that's been, and then it might be easier to look at these situations and say, where should we shake out in this? But that, I don't want to make too much work for you, and it's also, I'm not a trustee, but I think it will help clear it up.
Yeah, anything with regards to age discrimination, the age. Discriminate, this is age discrimination, with regards to public accommodation.
There are legal definitions for the word reasonable.
It's not, it's public accommodation, it's not reasonable accommodation, it's something. This is, if something is a public accommodation, you can't discriminate on the basis of age, and this is not accepted from the definition of public
Yeah.
accommodation, like, whereas in New York it would be, so.
The statute, yeah, just to keep everyone in the back. Statute reads, there essentially provides that it shall be discriminatory practice to deny any person within the jurisdiction of this state full and equal accommodations in any place of public accommodation or two, to discriminate, segregate, or separate on the basis of race, creed, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, gender identity, or expression, marital status, age, lawful source of income, intellectual disability, mental disability, physical disability, status as a veteran, or status as a victim of domestic violence. So, full and equal accommodation. Discriminating, segregating, separating, that's the issue at hand. We would say, say that it's the segregation and separation of those spaces that comes into play. Because they are getting full accommodation. Declining all that stuff, don't restrict on anything from access to the library. It's the spaces in the library that I think are at issue. So, yeah, having more information on what they're going to do with any, any additional context with regards to age discrimination. Say age discrimination, I keep thinking about mandatory retirement ages.
Yeah.
But
I think it's just a matter of trying to be reasonable and make it easy as possible for staff to enforce something that does not also present a tremendous risk. And I don't know, I'm not hearing in this conversation tremendous risk, so I kind of feel like I need to be convinced that there is a risk.
Yeah, I think understanding what the situations are that it happens, right? Then you'll get a color to it, to say, if this is it, we're willing to accept this, right?
Yeah,
If it's,
right.
based on what we've seen in the past, right? I think that'll help. And then if there happens to be any other crazy legal thing out there, but at least to get a sense for what the incidences have been.
yeah, just one last question before we move on. I just want to pop into. So the issue between the two different versions is the language of for. It seems.
Well, the current policy,
Yeah.
the current
So
policy says you have to be this age,
yes.
be within these grades to enter the
Yes.
space. The other one says that it's designed for and doesn't explicitly come out and say that it's restricted based on age, but it says that if you're encouraged.
So the idea that unaccompanied, so what this current, the draft says is that they must take the items, which is encouraged to take items, basically a softening in the optionality of the. Okay. Yeah, so I think just additional information with regards to age as it relates. If Scott, any feedback you can get from the library community would be helpful. Obviously, we know where the ALA stands, but just to know what your fellow Connecticut think about. So we will move that to our next agenda. Bill, thank you. I really appreciate it. It has, I know it's a lot, but it's super helpful. It really is. We do want to make sure that we're doing. Keep our library town protected while keeping everyone happy at the library. Patrons and staff alike. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we will skip over our children's teen spaces policy and move to the 2025 scheduled service. Scott.
So this will be found on page 20. It will look a little bit different than the draft that you were given at the last board meeting or at the April board meeting. We've switched this to correspond with the fiscal year. So this will cover, it'll cover July. So remember, Stephanie, our fiscal year, the year we operate on is a school calendar year. So it starts July 1st and goes over. We switched this just because then we have a better idea based on the budget, whether or not we can be open certain days or need to be closed certain days. And we'll add it as a standing agenda item for February to be voted on in March. So really you'll be covering some days that are within this fiscal year. And again, it just allows us to make changes based on the next year's proposed budget and then look at the usage of the prior year. This really isn't anything different than what you've seen in the past. It really coincides with most of the days that the town is closed. Really what the town has kind of given us the ability to do is be closed not after work. We get to, so Stephanie knows, from basically 9 to 5, the town decides when we're open Monday through Friday. And after 5 o'clock, it's really weird. And on the weekend, we get to decide what we're open next. And so if I wake up and say there's not enough, being a former New Yorker saying there's not enough snow on the ground, we're gonna be open. But if the town decides they're gonna be closed, then we're closed. But on a Saturday, you know, and I don't judge it that way. But you know, but if a Saturday comes, I'm the one who has to wake up at 4 in the morning to decide, are we gonna be open or not, usually calling DPW. So the same thing for holidays. So the best way to explain this is we're almost always closed when the town is closed on like for Veterans Day or Memorial Day. But we'll decide at those corresponding Saturdays and Sundays, we're gonna be opened or closed. And also if we're gonna be closed the evening before a holiday. So in other words, on the bigger holidays like Christmas Eve, we're gonna close at 5, 3 o'clock. So that's when the town closes. I am personally against that and believe we should be closed for Christmas Eve, but we're not gonna get into that. But because the town's open, we're open on that Christmas. When a Christmas falls on a Friday, we're closed usually that Saturday and Sunday. Part of it is to be nice to our staff. Part of it is because not that many people are coming into the building. And because we have a budget for part-time staff, we're very careful about trying to figure out that how to use those hours and that money in a tactical way so we can be open at other times. So there are some, you know, like we're Memorial Day, and before I came, we were open on the Saturday before Memorial Day and Labor Day. We're now closed on those Saturdays and Sundays, giving the staff a 3-day weekend, given the building. It's not just the staff, but the building being closed. If we're closed all 3 of those days, Jan or I aren't gonna get a call because something's wrong in the building. And also, it really, anyone who runs public buildings will tell you, you need to give your buildings days off. Just to kind of let everything settle. So that's really what's reflected in this schedule. And it's much easier to schedule when you're closed on some of these days as well, because full timers get a choice to be off. Then we have to find part timers to work in buildings. That's not always easy.
So Scott, one thing in regards to, there's no change to approved 2024 dates.
No,
We voted on the calendar last year.
so yeah, so this incorporates dates that have already been voted on.
Yep, but I'm just saying, they're not.
They're not gonna change. There's no adjustment.
24.
No.
That's all I want to confirm is there was no adjustment to the already approved calendar.
Established days, we're just gonna, this really starts.
Changes the cadence totally.
Yeah, and starts on our coming July.
Yep. Perfect.
And we usually say closing at 5, but the town now is closed early. Select person likes to surprise us, which is great when you work in a non-public facing department, because everybody from taxes gets to go home early. They knew they were going home anyway. For the public buildings, it's a little bit more of a, and sometimes we keep open, but it's like Jan and I, and that's it. You know, so this way we're saying closing at 3. No matter what, if for some reason, I don't think the select person will do this, but if for some reason they decide not to close early, staff have to stay, then we hang out for a couple hours, shelf some books, get our offices in
That's
order,
fine.
eat way too many cookies, so.
Just the Thanksgiving Eve. let's say, yeah. All right. Lost my agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the draft schedule of service for fiscal year 25?
I so move that the board of trustees adopt the 2020 fiscal year 2025 proposed draft. Second?
All in favor? Right, so it passes, it is approved. Fantastic. During the fiscal part. So that concludes unfinished business, unless there's anything that we have not discussed, that we should.
Okay.
Good. Moving into new business, first is the July annual meeting. So we have our first meeting, it is always the annual meeting for the board. Scott had some thoughts, wanted to share with the rest of the board, and, you know, they were good, so.
So I'd like to propose we either hold the meeting in the memorial room, which is a little prettier, or the periodical room, inviting former trustees and stakeholders, so members of the board, maybe the selectmen will appear. We can invite him and staff, members of all of the select persons. And maybe start the business meeting at 7:30, have a little bit of wine and cheese, maybe sponsored by friends, a little bit of wine and cheese.
What even we do? You can buy the wine and cheese.
So, but you know, maybe
Like,
so maybe
We can sell you the wine that we have.
so some cheese, crackers, wine provided by someone, a little bit of socialization, then start the business meeting at 7:30, not make it a heavy agenda. July's agenda is not usually heavy. I think that's just like a nice way, and invite former trustees so that they can choose to come and give our chairman a chance to maybe make a
Speech.
little speech. I didn't throw
You
that
don't
one.
like my chairman's report?
No, I think it would just be nice.
I think that, I agree, I think that would be a nice way to, and we'll. Our next item is the new trustee joining us as well, welcoming them in. Ideally, it is before everyone's going away for summer. I think this is most of the one. So, no, I like that idea, I think,
What's that meeting date?
was
Do we invite any of the librarians as well?
Yeah,
Fill up the-
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
July 8th.
But anyway, I do think it would make sense to have a memorial room.
Well,
Holster,
we know somebody who books that room. So
yeah, people have
Yulia is a small.
So with regards, what I would say is, you can also that next month, that it's some of the line items for, let's unit. Any issue with, you know, minimal. Athletics, provide. So, yeah, let's just do that. Check right straight.
Yep.
Cool. So our next item of business is our trustee search for Chris's replacements, which, he has, oh, one meeting left, provided he attends it. So with that, do we have a motion to enter into executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Second? All in favor? So with that, we'll move into executive session. Jen, can you hit pause on the recording? We start the recording. We've come out of executive session. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor? So our meeting will adjourn at 8:52 PM. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next month at Fairfield Woods.